Hey everyone, I am Joe Russo, and welcome to a very special episode of Pizza Film School. Joining us today is visionary director Zack Snyder. Zack, welcome to Pizza Film School.
Awesome.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
I'm so psyched you're here.
Amazing.
So as everyone knows, the premise of Pizza Film School is we get some pizza, we hang out, we talk. Pizza today is from D-Town. This is Detroit style. This is in honor of our special interview today. It's very heavy though, so we may get sluggish about halfway through the interview, so we apologize ahead of time. But let's jump into it. So, the premise of Pizza Film School is we talk to a director about their process from start to finish, right? There's no handbook. If you're a young filmmaker out there, it's really difficult to gain access and insight into how other directors work. So we created this as a way to share information, share process, maybe inspire people who don't have an opportunity to go to film school or can't afford film school. Hopefully they can listen to this podcast and get some good information if they have the dream of being a film director.
Awesome. Yeah, and to give it a focus, we pick a single film from a director and try to structure the conversation around the experience of that film.
Great.
And we were hoping to do your Justice League.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
So just to talk a little bit from soup to nuts, as filmmakers, it's something we sit in awe of with the complexity of visual effects that you bring to a movie. It's beyond what I think just about anyone can do on the planet.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I'd love to get behind that a little bit and talk a little bit about your background. You started as a painter, correct?
Yeah, so I wasn't awesome at high school at the normal math. But the normal stuff,
Yes.
I was pretty good at PE, I'll be honest.
Right brain, left brain, you were a left brain.
Yeah, a little bit on the left. I'd gotten kicked out of my boarding school and ended up in public school. I had pretty much all my requirements to graduate. I think I had to take a history class at Ramapo High School in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey is where I ended up. I had been at this small boarding school in Connecticut and ended up in public school. And I remember I went in there and I had a tie on the first day in a blazer.
Stark difference.
And the guy was like, "Are you gonna wear
Yeah.
a tie every day?"
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "It's cool not to." Okay, that's fine.
Did you wear it day two? No.
Day two, I think I just wore the blazer.
Yeah.
'Cause I didn't feel like it was cool not to wear a blazer.
And what is it what got you kicked out of your, if you don't
Well,
mind me asking?
I like to think that I'd been making a film in my boarding school, and it was kind of like a remake of Apocalypse Now, but sort of set in our boarding school. And one of the kids is sort of Kurt's. Well, the principal was Kurt's, and the kid goes to he doesn't murder him or anything. It wasn't like that. That's frowned upon. But how he goes sort of insane through his pursuit of the headmaster. But anyway, so it turned out to be slightly controversial, and I like to think that's what it was. I think there were some other things, but
The headmaster wasn't on board with his interpretation.
No, so I like to think it was the film that got me fully expelled, and they had trumped up some other charges. But I think it was.
That's amazing.
But, they didn't really have a strong art department, art sort of focus at my boarding school. But when I got to public school, yeah, exactly. When I got to public school, because I had most of my requirements to graduate, I just decided to take 3 art classes. I could take 3 art classes back to back in the morning, and then I think I had my history class, and then pretty much PE for the rest of the day. It was pretty great. And so instead of taking AP classes, that's what I did, because I could have, done that, but I decided not to do that. And so I was able to really generate a pretty great art portfolio. So then I went to this school in London called Heatherley's and was studying to be a painter, even though I had done films and shot movies, all through high school. And that was kind of my hobby. I just was, when I was a senior in high school, and I just felt like being a painter was weirdly romantic. And so I thought I would do that. But then during my course of studies in London at Heatherley's, my art advisor, and maybe because my paintings were horrible, she said, you really loved making these movies, and your paintings are really cinematic. They're always is that a thing? And I said, oh, maybe that. I do love making movies, and that was fun. And I always thought that would be cool, but I always thought, can I be a movie director? That feels like a big ask, So I I sent out for a bunch of film school catalogs, and the Art Center College of Design catalog here up in Pasadena came, and I totally judged it by the cover completely. Said like, this is where I want to go to school. Because it was like a black catalog with an orange dot on it, right? No words. I was like, this,
That's cool.
This is
Sophisticated.
crazy. Yeah, I was like, this is intense stuff. And I think the inside, I remember there was a picture in the film department. It was like there was like students on a crane with a Panavision camera, and the guy was pointing. And I was like, that's rad. That's cool. We get to do that?
They sold you.
Turns out they didn't have that year. Someone had gotten that, but it was cool. But so that's how I ended up in Pasadena, and I had submitted my paintings as part of my, I had
Your portfolio to get
films
in. Yeah.
and my paintings, and they were like, I think that really was what got me over.
While you were studying film at Art Center, did you continue painting or take classes in other arts?
They have a really rigorous, the illustration and sort of art spine stayed pretty intense. A lot of my friends who I went to school with couldn't really draw and aren't awesome at painting or drawing. Great filmmakers, but just don't have that skill set, which is 100% not necessary to make a movie. But we're really complaining about the rigorous kind of like having to paint swatches and make grayscales out of gouache and all that they forced you to do. They hated it and didn't do well at that stuff, but I loved that part of it. And to this day, I draw like 90% of the storyboards for all the movies. I draw them all myself. And so it's super exhausting, and I don't recommend that. No, but but it's just the way I've always done it. And even then, I really meticulously drew everything before we shot, and I think and I think, frankly, that's what's helped me, I think, in the visual effects, with the visual effects sort of components of the movies I make, kind of understanding what elements would be effects.
Well, they're very rich and textured, and the use of light is very painterly. It wasn't until I found out, I did a little research a few years ago, I was like, how does he do this? And I found out you had a background as a painter. I went, okay, that all makes sense now. Because one of the hardest things to do on movies of scale is communicate vision, right? Because that vision has to be translated to thousands of people. And anywhere along the way, that vision can get corrupted, right? Because there's an artist somewhere in London, right, who makes a decision, on a sequence that suddenly sets off a whole different, lighting pattern for that sequence. And it's, when you're working on movies that are this ginormous, you have to keep your arms around it in a way.
And it's hard to.
And you have to communicate. It's really hard. Yeah. But communication is critical, and it was something that we introduced. Anthony and I started saying we should be doing keyframes, critical keyframes, where we're bringing in every member of our key department, our A operator, our DP, production designer, and everyone is contributing to these keyframes per sequence, right? Great. So the process we would use is we would have a keyframe that was distributed to everyone. It was on set, we'd blow it up, it'd be in the corner, everyone knew exactly what we're trying to accomplish.
So sort of like, this is the look depth, this is
it.
Everybody understands, this is where we want to be.
Every department is driving at that image.
We give it to every VFX company that was contributing to that sequence, this is what it is, and we would use that for consistency throughout. Certainly the only way we got through Infinity War and Endgame was doing that, was bringing this level of specificity as a way to communicate. Because we're not talking to every artist. We're not talking to every, you're not talking to every VFX company. We had a strong relationship with ILM. We'd go up there once a year and hang out and meet as many people as we could. But you can't do that for the 9 other companies that are also working on your films.
And even then down the ladder, there's still 1,000 guys that are, contributing. So
for sure, exactly.
How are you doing it? How are you creating that consistency?
I think it's in a similar way. A really good friend of mine, this guy Jared Parrington, who I work with on a lot of, basically I'll do a sketch and send it to him, and he'll knock up a giant painting of it, that's really, and we'll go back and forth on it, and it's basically the same thing. Like, I really try and generate as much art as I can on a sequence, or even the set design and everything. You know, the problem is, like, you know, when you draw the storyboard, and I'm like, oh, the door really needs to be hinged on this side, because, you know, I'm going to be like, because you drew the whole sequence. But a lot of times, you know, at first I found that those kinds of details weren't necessarily, you know, everyone would be like, oh, you know, like, how seriously does he take these, these drawings?
The door really need to be
know,
on the
like,
right.
does it really need to be like,
Oh, that's a nice image.
it's cool, but, you know. And I think that over time, that one part of it, as far as the specificity of the drawings, and like, look, it really does need to, in order, because if you flip the door, it kind of, everything's, like when he opens it now, he's covered. You see, like, you can't, so like all of that ripples. And so, but for me, like, the sort of creation of those, in a very similar way to what you do, these kind of keyframes, and they'll be, depending how much I like the scene, you know, or I'm into it, or it's really fussy, there might be, you know, a number of those kinds of paintings that I do for particular sequences. Then I just try and really get at the drawings really carefully. And I do find it a really great tool just to get everybody on the same page. What happens is I start to split off from the script a little bit, right? Because what happens is when I draw the storyboards, I do, because I'm kind of blocking, the first blocking pass is what I do with the drawings. Because when I'm drawing, I'll be like, if I had written the script and then drew it, you know, the rewrite in the drawings happens a little bit. Maybe a little dialogue tweak, because like, if I'm drawing like, oh, it's an over and then some close-ups or whatever, and I'll write the dialogue under the drawing, you know, and sometimes I'd find like, oh, I wrote that, you know, they come in the room and then there's like a walk and talk over to the guy, but it doesn't really work because, you know, the room's really not as big as I thought it was, and, you know, whatever. So I can kind of do that first sort of level of, it's not editing so much as it is kind of doing the puzzling it out. So
Almost the topography of the movie.
Yeah, and you know how like that always evolves, you know.
Yeah.
And then when the actors get in there, they have their own ideas, and they're like, oh, you know, I think it'd be, you know, like I want to do the scene up on top of it, you know. They,
Right.
Okay, well, it'd be better. I think it's better for just like here, like, you know, near each other. And then a lot of times I'll use the drawings. I'll be like, you know, I kind of drew these guys at a table, and they're like, oh, like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I see.
You know, so it does help.
When you start,
I just have to say, like, listening to your process, it's so, first of all, you can just see how it translates to your filmmaking, how your filmmaking is so elevated because of that process. And I'm so jealous because Joe and I are like, we can't draw to save our lives. So it's
stick figures on napkins, you know. And then Thanos is going to come in. He's an arrow.
It's working.
Yeah.
we have great collaborators. So yeah.
I draw a ton, and I still have a ton of board artists that I work with, you know? So do you guys, how's that relationship for you guys with the board artists?
It's great. It's a little more cavalier in that, like, we'll throw a couple of board artists at something, right?
Sure.
We like to ideate. I mean, our whole process is communication. And ideation is a big part of that, like verbal ideation, because there's two of us, so we have to talk through everything.
We just pitch each other ideas all day long.
So we'll have an idea for a sequence. You know, you get to that point where you do enough of these movies, and you go, okay, I'm going to need, you know, it's a third act. I got to get everybody together. We're going to have to, you know, take this character down because that's going to be a big moment for the audience. Who should take him down? Well, we've set that up earlier in the movie. Maybe it'll be a big payoff, and then this person shows. And so you just start orchestrating all the dynamics of it, and then we break it up into chunks, so say like a third act, and then we'll give it to different artists, right?
Oh, sure.
And then we work with a lot of artists, so we just, what's their skill set, right? Oh, this one's character-oriented. Oh, this one's big on high concept and set pieces. And, you know, so we'll try to assign based on skill set. And then, you know, they'll start giving us ideas, and then sometimes we'll make them trade.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
You know, and then they'll give us different ideas, and then, you know, we'll piece it all together, and then say, okay, here, you're going to finish off this sequence, and here are the great ideas that we like, and then you get some more over here, and it's constantly shifting and moving. I mean, literally until like 6 weeks before we release the film.
Yeah, and then we'll eventually, if we start to circle around ideas that really resonate with us, we'll move that image from the concept artists to the art department. And then we'll start to build it out into these key frames that we use. So the art department will then give it the production designer will give it its sort of framing within the movie. Then we'll make sure that the cinematographer weighs in on it. We'll make sure every department weighs in on that image as we tweak and refine it, so that eventually it becomes this document that everybody has contributed to, and it's what we're going for, and everybody, visual effects also certainly feeds into that process.
So do you guys think that is the process for the keyframe, like, does it start kind of as one of the frames of the, you're like, okay, here's the shot where the guys all come into the room and everyone looks badass and you can see the whole thing, and we're gonna take that frame, now like, let's knock this up and get it painted, turn it into kind of, it's the key moment. It's
whatever that critical moment is, that's
yeah.
the thing we'll spend all the energy on and the resources on. And two, we didn't mention that, sometimes you'll take board work and you'll give it to the viz team. Because what's going on in it is so big. If they're flying characters, if they're characters with really extreme powers, that's when we'll send it over to the viz team. Well, characters who don't have flying powers, we tend to assign that to our stunt viz team.
Oh, sure.
So then stunt viz is punching, and it's more acrobatic choreography. And then once you've gone through the boards and you've come up with the ideas, it then gets disseminated out to those two teams. Then from that, we then turn into keyframes.
For me, it's like, and I do almost exactly that as well, because the stunt teams I've worked with forever, I'm sure you guys have the same, and they make their stunt viz and they're in the warehouse, with their cardboard sets and stuff. I'm going over there after this, as a matter of fact, to talk to the guys. But, for me, it's also where you split off from pre-viz or stunt viz, and then like you get, sometimes, that'll overlap into kind of a semi-normal sequence between two actors, that like it kind of comes down and then it goes to like real previs, and everything becomes like on the planet, or any of these giant superheroes saying the dialogue, or they're flying, or they're in space, or Steppenwolf, whatever it is, that's where you really kind of go like, wow, like that, the drawing became the stunt viz, became the actual like pre-viz, and now
it's conceptualized in a way that it can be translated to the film.
And do you guys cut, the stunt viz is kind of cut like a movie, right?
Yeah,
so it
100%.
Feels like a movie. And then the pre-viz, of course, kind of like a movie. And sometimes I'll do an animatic, even of like sequences that aren't really, action-y per se.
You can get the flow.
Basically,
You're sort of like animation. You're making the movie prior to making the movie.
Yeah.
We would joke that when you do these big films, is that you make the movie like 5 times before you finally shoot it. We tend to
we'll do edits that'll include all of those elements. And just sort of have this kind of crazy Frankenstein montage
of stunt viz, pre-viz, storyboards. Early on, I think, before I think in Winter Soldier, we were asking some of the actors just give us their lines on an iPhone, and then we're cutting them into the animatic, and again, just trying to process it. And then once you get more comfortable and confident with the process, where you want that flexibility. We work with the same camera operator on everything. We're a really tight relationship with him. So we don't want to exclude him from the process in any way. So we start working with him much earlier in the process. But also we know where there are moments that, listen, this is going to be people talking in a room, and that's going to be based on, Downey's going to have an opinion about where he stands. And, so we're just not going to waste a lot of energy on that now. But what we're going to waste energy on is, the things over here. The minute that a helmet goes on, it's no longer Robert. Now it's this character we have to control, but make it feel like him. And, it takes a lot of energy and effort. So that's where we've learned over time, just like where we'll ascribe energy versus where we won't in the prep phase of the project.
It's funny that you mentioned that the camera operator. I think that's the thing that, I have a hugely close relationship with my camera operator as well. And I find it's a thing probably in film school. No one's going to teach you that your camera operator is like the relationship is super important. There's so much subtlety that goes on, in how shots are set up, and how the camera moves work, and where even just the weight of the frame and how it's transitioning. Really, you're like, guys, I really want to end on this guy. Sometimes, like, that translation, if it doesn't happen correctly, even just the way the shot's set up, it can't happen.
That's right. They're the direct conduit of what's in here. to the rest of the world, right? Because whatever they film is what you're going to edit together, and that's the movie.
Yeah, and I think that that's a relationship that I don't know that is really talked about very
At
much.
all.
No,
we agree.
we find that our process as directors has gotten much stronger and more dynamic as our relationship with our camera operator has developed. I mean, it's just it changes everything.
Yeah, I worked, this guy, John Clothier, who I've worked with on all my movies. Well, the first movie he did was Watchmen, and he, for me, and I always noticed more than anyone on set, he had my drawings like in his pocket.
Right.
Right? And I'd always see him like take out the drawing. Like everyone else would be working and he'd be like looking at the drawings and like looking and kind of going like, yeah, this doesn't look like what we're supposed to be, like what Zach drew, you know? And so, and everyone would be like, oh, whatever, you know, like they're like, we looked at the drawings a week ago, we don't need to look at them again, you know, and so it's just and I was like, that guy right there, like I gotta stay.
And they can command the set in a way, right? Because then they can start orchestrating, talking to the set department, talking to lighting, talking to the DP about, you know, a vision.
Zach really wants the camera here. You know,
They could be that individual on set who is the most important in terms of the mise en scène and the execution of the movie. And you're right, like we said the exact same thing. They don't have a class in film school that's called, you know, a relationship between director and a camera operator. It might be the most significant relationship on a production of
and
a
it
film.
really is, and especially if also the DP and the camera operator are really close and trust each other.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, then that relationship is really like a ballet because they can, if for instance you're saying like, I really want to just, you know, the DP might have envisioned the scene and sort of lit the scene where maybe it's not 100% working for, I mean, everything looks good until like, you know, you're like, I really want to get closer, like, and shit, like this light's going to shadow whatever it is. You know, there's a million things, but if the A camera operator kind of is intuitive, will know like, guys, that light, it's not going to work there because they're really going to want to be here. I know it, you know, like that. That's a huge deal. It shapes the entire dynamic of the scene, and without that guy who's kind of technical and understands what you're going to really want.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of people think that a lot of times, and traditionally, you know, that people would think that would fall to the DP.
Yep.
You know, but a lot of times the minutia of the actual camera move and how it's framed and stuff.
There's a big distinction, right? There are a lot of DPs who function like what we call European DPs, where they want to focus almost exclusively on lighting, you know? And then there are other DPs who are former operators who love the operation of the camera, and in fact, a lot of times drive the camera operator insane because they really want to be operating the camera, right? But they're different. So, you know, the way we work is we have strong lighting DP with a really strong A operator.
Right.
And, you know, the two of them work well together, but the A operator is responsible for the camera, how the camera moves, lens choices. They do it in discussion with the DP, but the DP lights, and the DP lights beautifully. Part of it, too, is like we like to move at a quick pace because you're there for a prescribed amount of time. And the actors are there for a prescribed amount of time. The crew runs out of gas after a certain amount of hours. You accumulate those hours. You start having a slow set. And suddenly, 30 days in, everybody's operating at 50%. And that's disastrous for the quality of the film. So we like to move at pace. So it's important that a DP focus exclusively on the lighting, operator on this, because it keeps the set moving. We don't cut in between takes. Once we get the actors in there, we just like to focus on it for 6 or 7 takes. Nobody has to go to the bathroom or get a smoke, and you know, it really just keeps them focused on the work. Allows us to, because we like to build performance through layers. So every take is like a different opportunity for us to try to get another shade that we're looking for, rather than trying to get them to do it all at once. And then we can compound those or build those how we want to in the edit room.
Cool.
Yeah, you know, for a second, I want to go back to film school for a moment.
Yep.
Because, you know, part of the goal of this conversation is to make, you know, the process accessible to first-timers or people just trying to find their way into filmmaking or think about it, especially when they're coming from places where they don't have a lot of resources for that. There's a lot of controversy right now around film school recently in terms of like, it's expensive, it takes a lot of time and effort, et cetera. Is it worth it? What's your sort of view of your experience in film school? And number two, when you look at other, I know you went to the Art Center with a lot of very successful filmmakers who would go on to be a lot of successful filmmakers. when you look at other people who went through the film school program with you, most of them working in film, or did they end up in other areas?
Well, I was in a really small, when I was at Art Center, the film department was really small. I was in class with, my graduating class was, I think, there was 4 of us. That's how small it was.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it was me and Larry Fong and this guy, Clay Staub, who's a very successful commercial director and shot a lot of second unit for me. So for us, we were just like, just like friends. Like it was just like a weird little group of friends. And, there was a lot of talented filmmakers in the classes right around me. And Michael Bay and Tarsim, a bunch of guys right, a year ahead, a year behind, but all of us kind of together. I do think their voice is very similar to what, I don't know that they changed tremendously in film school. I would say the only thing, one of the big benefits of film school is that you can fail kind of a little bit, You can fail and it's not that big of a deal.
It gives you a laboratory.
It gives you a chance to take some cuts, take some swings, and not have a studio go well, that was no good, so you're never working again.
Now
you know what I mean?
Now you're in movie jail.
Yeah, exactly.
Forever. Yeah.
And I think that to me is the cool part of film school. That's your chance to do something weird. Go for it. Don't.
What's interesting about.
But the voices. Those people didn't change. That's the thing that I think.
Right, they were
that's the
intrinsically who they were when they got there.
Yeah.
It just gave them an opportunity to play around with equipment, think about ideas, be inspired by ideas.
Find some like-minded
right.
souls who
you
they
and
can
Larry
become
worked together for
collaborators
years.
Yep. Larry's
Coming out
one
there.
of my best friends.
Yeah.
He shot a bunch of my movies.
Yeah, amazing.
It's a very funny story. I
collaboration.
worked with Larry on a pilot 15 years ago. And there's this thing our crew refers to as agree to the Russos, because we try to run 4 units all the time. We're like, okay, the studio's giving us 30 days. Well, we're gonna get 60 days of work in 30 days. And I remember Larry was halfway through the shoot on this thing, and I was producing. I wasn't even directing it. And I remember he turned to me at one point. He goes, "You are insane." And I was like, "Larry, get a camera up top at the top of this tower. We need another one down here, and we'll run a unit over there. I just need you to light all 3, and we got to do it by 6:30. Sun's going down."
Seems pretty straightforward.
Exactly.
Pretty straightforward.
But
only the other unit too. That's cool.
But an incredible shooter.
That's
Larry.
cool.
Yeah,
he's
an amazing
a
shooter.
great
Yeah.
and a great guy.
Yeah.
So when you were coming out of film school, did you know where you were going next? Did you have a movie in mind? Did you have a road in mind?
Well, when I was at Art Center, its big strength was, commercials, TV commercials. That was or music videos. That was kind of its specialty. Just the idea that everyone would go to work was a big thing. Everyone, the school and Art Center as a school, they pride themselves on really creating skilled artists that know how to work in the world. And that was a big thing. When I left school, I had 5 or 6 TV commercials that I had done in school. And they were pro quality. I went straight to work, I was 25 and I was shooting, I was on working.
Yeah.
And then over the next 10 years, from me being from 25 to 35, I just shot, a ton of music videos and a ton of commercials. And really, for me, that was the real school for me in a lot of ways, because I made every kind of shot I could think of. When I was a director cameraman, I was the DP director, and so when I got Dawn of the Dead, they said you can't shoot the movie. The directors don't shoot too. And I was like, okay.
Right, we want you in the chair.
You got to focus on
right.
stuff. And I was like, I ended up operating half the movie anyway. Matt Leonetti, who was the DP, would always be like, Zach, you should operate this shot. And I'd be like, what?
That's good.
Yeah, he's like, he's amazing. He'd always be like, Zach, you, because the operator would do something, and I'd be like, the guy should. I remember we had this one shot where the guy had to run and then jump down a manhole, right? And the operator couldn't run back fast enough, and it was supposed to be a handheld shot. So we did this mount where we rigged the camera. I had a monitor like this, and the camera's on me, like pointing backwards.
That's awesome.
So I ran forward, and then I had to run over the manhole, and then they pulled this plywood away from it so I wouldn't fall in it. And then and the hardest part of the shot was I had to tilt up because the camera was tilting down, right? So your brain, it doesn't work. Because you're watching the guy, and then like he jumps down, and you have to go like this, right? So, and I remember, and Matt was like, Zach can do it. Let Zach do it. Because like the operator tried to do it, but he kept tilting down, instead of like you just short circuit. Right?
But by the way, we have to cut this shot into the pizza film school somehow.
It's right. It's right when they come out of Andy's gun store and after the explosion.
And then, so when you were doing commercials, was that also a film school for you?
100%.
Right.
Commercials was a huge.
Yeah, you're trying everything in commercials, right?
Yeah.
Because something interesting about
a lot of
working
visual
in it.
effects.
Yeah.
That's when my relationship with visual effects really started.
It's limited storytelling time, right? So a lot of it's hyper visual.
Super efficient.
You can play with different crew members, different kinds of equipment, every toy in the world, because sometimes the budgets are exorbitant on them. But
got to that eventually,
Yeah. That was part of commercials for us too, was just we always say this, you want to be a good carpenter, you got to build a lot of tables, So you want to be a good filmmaker, shoot. And it just get better and better over time.
Television was also very useful for us on that level because it's just
the pace was relentless.
We did some network TV early on, and it's just you're just shooting.
No, so you're doing 22 episodes in a season. Then we had 2 other shows that also had huge orders. So you get to this point where you're like delivering like 40 episodes of a year.
And the scene work is insane. So every time you start to get the alchemy of the scene work, the literal. You'll know immediately after 20 episodes, even from moment to moment, like, nope, that's not working. Mm-hmm. That's not a thing.
Yep.
What you're doing is
not gonna work. Yeah.
Come on, we gotta. I need this. This because it's kind of an interesting thing. Also, is how when it's moment to moment, and the moments have to build, and everything has to this has to inform this, and no one's really paying attention to it except for, the director is really the one who should be understanding
all of it,
that. Yeah, and I think that I can't imagine. It's amazing to think okay, so it's 21 episodes. Are they half hour, or was it an hour or a half hour? So
we were doing half hours
mostly
at
half
the time.
So that's still
Yeah. It's, I don't know.
10 hours.
Right, of content.
10 hours of content.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's an insane amount of,
And that's what we learned at that time too, that the real function of a director was to hold all of the choices in your head, right? And that was sort of the more that you could hold in your head, the better you got at understanding how to, because you're shooting out of order, you're shooting very quickly. Half-hour episode, we got 5 days to do it in, maybe 6. You're shooting 8 pages a day. We had this episode we did with Jack Black where, he's in the whole episode, but he had 1 day available.
So for the essay, we conjugate.
Conjugate? Conjugal visit. Lame. Okay, stick and move.
Right, so we had to shoot with a double, and everything had to be conceived and constructed in a way that worked. When we didn't have Jack, we had to know we'd jump from set to set to set with him. We'd shoot just his close-ups, maybe get 1 wide shot, move on, go to the next set, and then we had to go back through and cover the whole thing over a double. And I realized you have to hold all this in your head. And the more I held it in my head, the better I got at doing it, And so, this will lead, I think, to script. We talk a little bit about script. Like, script for us is the Bible, right? We spend a lot of time on the script, almost all of our prep. And in fact, to the point where, the AD starts knocking on the door with us and the writers going, you guys got to come out and start talking to people about what, we're like, it's in the script.
Almost.
But that's really, it's critical
Slide under the door.
Exactly. That you communicate exactly to the thousands of people who have to read that script and know what to do every day, exactly what's in there. And we will put notes in that tell them, hair and makeup, what we're looking for. And, so we try to make sure that the plan is really, really solid so we can chuck it.
Does that
when we get to set.
document evolve? Say you give it to me and I'm the studio, right?
Yeah.
Does that version of the script not have as much
Yes.
specific
Yeah.
notes?
No, we tailor it for every stage of the process.
Okay,
Exactly.
all right.
It's a great question. No, at that point, it's written to be a compelling read to convince whoever needs to be convinced to greenlight it. Then
I have a
through-
giant
yeah.
amount of money.
So,
I'm not understanding this note about like
220,
it says like makeup artists make sure there's scuffy dirt on the face.
face,
What is that?
yeah. Should be sweaty.
Should be sweaty, right?
That's right.
It's a weird sentence.
But it's true, like you focus all of your energy when you start purely on storytelling. We have a codified process that we created, working with the same two writers through all of our Marvel work. So Christopher Mark, Steve McFeely. And that codified process was made up of a lot of stuff we had learned in television, using a writer's room and using a bunch of creative minds sitting together. We believe in this thing called the mastermind principle, which says that two minds are not doubly better than one, they're exponentially better. So we're big believers in best idea wins, and we have to be available because we have to be available to each other, so we have to be available to ideas coming from other people. So that process of working on a story, so say Kevin Feige pokes his head in a room and says we need Civil War, we go, okay, great. When do we have till? You got a year. All right, we better work fast, and now we get our codified process out. Okay, let's iterate for 2 or 3 weeks. We're gonna talk about what the potential stories are. Then we're gonna start to put something down on a piece of paper. It's 3 pages long, right? But it's
all
the
good
story,
stuff, though.
right?
Yeah, three
page
pages
1
long.
is Act 1, page 2 is Act 2, page 3 is Act 3. This is where it starts, this is what happens in the middle, this is what happens at the end, this character dies at the end. We understand and agree on that. We can get Kevin in and he goes, okay, great, I like that. Then we move to the next phase, So for us, it's very disciplined. When you start on a script with something the scale of Justice League, are you starting from
On Justice
artwork?
League, Justice League was Chris Terrio, and I, after Batman vs. Superman, we had talked about what Justice League would be. We kind of, it's called Dawn of Justice, right? So, and the studio was they wanted Justice League, where we were going. And so
you knew you had the connective tissue.
we always had our eye on the Justice League kind of concept, as we were working. And so I believe we had an outline for Justice League that we just kind of generated while we were writing Batman vs. Superman, just kind of like over to the side. Because we wanted to be sure we were supporting this
Right.
long look with what we were writing for Batman vs. Superman. And there's all this weirdness in Batman vs. Superman anyway that eventually would make its way into Justice League that I was really adamant about, post-apocalyptic or any of that stuff, or I was really like, I really want to do this. When Darkseid destroys Earth, we're going to have 10 years of no Earth. So we should figure out what Batman's doing. Yeah, in the Road Warrior Earth. What is Batman in Road Warrior? So that was kind of like a big thing to me. That was the thing I really wanted to get to. And so Chris and I worked really diligently, and then to have a document that and it wasn't a secret document, but it was kind of our own. There was a lot of it that we constantly were developing. And then right near the end of finishing Batman vs. Superman, when I was kind of like the editing responsibilities had kind of, just diminished a little bit, we really started working, on Justice League. And Chris is a really incredible writer, and he's very beautifully manic in his style. I remember he had like a lot of Diet Coke, a lot of Post-it notes, like the Post-it notes, but they were in this massive bag. He looked like a drug dealer. It looked like a kilo of cocaine or something, like in his bag. He pulled it out, and I was like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's the Post-it notes." And then he started to try and
Putting back
reassemble.
up.
Yeah, but it was so it was very, and it's all like Yates quotes and like it's all
Oh, wow.
coolly bizarro. Like none of it. Like you can't look at the Post-it notes and go like, "Oh, cool. This is a note for the first act, like a line of dialogue. This
It's
is
like,
cool."
this goes first.
No,
or
no,
this-
it's completely like I go, I don't even know what this is amazing. Like this, someone make a book out of this. Forget the movie.
And it's thematics and it's things that
Yes,
are relevant
yes,
to
yeah, it's all
a
they're
given
all
scene. Yeah.
Each post-it note is incredibly interesting. Like there's no throwaway note. There's no post-it note that just says like, don't forget to this.
That's
Every
awesome.
single one of them, I'd be like,
Whenever
what?
you get stuck, you can just turn to one.
It
Just
kind
pick
of what
one
it-
up.
It kind of what it is. It's kind of like it becomes this source of like insane inspiration, but all of it's thematic to the thing we're working on. So weirdly, it's a bizarre process. I love it, but it's not. And when I write, I don't use that process at all. Like I have a similar process to you guys. I have 3 other writers I write with, very specific, very like note cardy, very
in a room.
On a
Let's talk about
race.
it. Interesting idea. Oh, that could be the end of Act 1. Let's put
100%.
that on a card and stick it
100%.
here. 2 days later, nope, that's the midpoint actually.
Yeah,
Let's move it to the
exactly.
midpoint because we need more setup.
Like suddenly, like that idea that everybody loved just keeps getting pushed over, and then it just falls off.
Falls off the thing.
And you're like, okay, but look what else it gave us. It gave us all this other cool stuff. So yeah, no, and then, and so the script for Justice League did evolve out of that. Now, I'll be honest that when the script, what happened with Justice League is we had the original script was much darker and weirder. And then when Batman vs. Superman came out and the studio was like, it's not funny enough. People want funnier movies. They want funny stuff in it. We did go back and do a big kind of lightened the movie overall.
How dare this dog speak to us like children?
And I would say that Justice League, my cut of Justice League, is in between. I always preserved some of the more intense stuff that I shot anyway.
Yep.
I thought that in retrospect, they would maybe want. Making sure I, of course, had what was on the page, but we had this other script. I think in the original script, Lois and Batman got together, briefly. And there was like this whole, there was this whole other thing that everyone was like, oh my God, you can't do that. So we were.
By the way, I love that. I wish you did do that.
Yeah, because Superman was dead. I was like, and Lois is a pretty amazing person. And so like.
But it also brings her into the story in a way. It's complex,
like, she's
it's surprising.
Not really, her part in Justice League is really, we had written it, especially since I had Amy, and Amy's like a genius. I really felt like we should lean on Amy, because she's just a great actress and like a force of nature. And so, and I just thought it really felt like and then I love the idea of like setting up this sort of concept. It's sort of like when you're, in a movie like where the husband goes off to war and he's dead and the wife moves on and then the husband appears.
Yeah.
Like I'm not dead.
Yeah.
Like I'm fine. Like,
how do you deal with that?
Yeah, how do you deal with that? And that was kind of what I
emotional,
I was super into that concept, that, oh no, Superman can be brought back to life.
Please.
So now what happens with this? And it was that Lois was like, I'm still in love with Superman. You were kind of a thing, but then at that point, Batman had already fallen in love with Lois and was like, okay, now I'm like.
It's brilliant. I want to see that.
I love that. Yeah.
One day.
That's super cool.
But so we had done we had done the changes for the studio, and we had, and I mean, look, I'll be frank, Chris and I are not the funniest guys in the world. We're not like, we're not like awesome joke writers.
I don't know. I'm laughing a lot
100%.
listening. I'm laughing a lot listening to you. I'll say that. But it's, it's
I'm
fun.
100%. I'm just 100% honest about that. And we had Ezra, and Ezra's pretty.
Right.
He's pretty funny.
Improver.
And so, he's kind of like that was kind of his role, to be the Flash and kind of be young and kind of be
the comic relief
a
guy who
little
comes in
irreverent
and
and not quite understanding, and kind of like in awe of Batman and Superman.
Barry Allen, Bruce Wayne.
You said that like it explains why there's a total stranger in my place, sitting in the dark, in my second favorite chair.
And he did a great job, and that part was great. But I do think that the process, and it's just a classic studio Hollywood process. You know, in their defense, they only can react to what they react to, you know. Like,
Which is a great point about reacting. It's an interesting thing to say because we talk about this all the time. Artists lead innovation and corporations follow it, right? And so a corporation coming in and saying it's not funny enough, it's going to be behind the curve of wherever this is heading. Audiences want to be surprised, right? Audiences don't want the same thing they had last week. You give them chocolate ice cream every day for a week, by like day 6, they're going to throw it back in your face and say, we've had enough of this shit.
And
you know?
it's exactly as you say, they wanted a funny movie 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Just to be that glacial in your movement, you're not going to.
They were on board with the concept and the vision and the direction you were going, and now they want to see the completion of that, right?
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, let's retrofit it or let's try to restructure it, and you know.
But also that point of view is like that we talk about too is like that's being reactive to what's currently happening out there, and like the big wins to be had in storytelling and movie making is when you're bringing something to the table that surprises people. Right, that's where the big wins.
I mean, that's why I think where we've ended up with, I think right now we're in a really golden age of TV, in the sense that, like, TV shows are much better at being,
100%.
at being, like, showing you something not only that you've never seen before, or catching you off balance, or like making a turn that you didn't see coming. You know,
they're riskier. Yeah.
They're way riskier and way kind of like Euphoria, for instance. I was watching, and the show is just
unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Like, that show shouldn't exist. It's so good.
Yeah.
You know, and I just think that's the kind of thing. Like, I watch that show and I go, this movie would never get made.
Yeah.
Like,
Never get made.
This movie can't exist.
By the way, it would have, because of the sort of corrupt environment that exists around the release of films, and by that I mean a toxic environment of like box office pundits and all the horseshit that goes into a release of a movie, that if something doesn't hit a predetermined target by I don't know who, you know, then it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't open, and now it's going to struggle, and it has a different path it has to follow. A show like Euphoria, if it were a movie, 1/20th of the people would have seen it as a film versus a show, maybe even
it's like
less.
Squid Game. It's Squid
Right.
Game too. Like, you can imagine Squid Game coming here as a movie would be, it's art house.
Yeah,
maybe
100%.
no one. And now it's like hundreds of millions of people, and like, because it's exactly Euphoria and Squid Game taking you to a place you just there's no way you have any idea like where you're going or what's happening. And that, and I think that people, that's what
they want. And what's compelling about that too is that, like, it's interesting, the format, your cut is 4 hours long, right? Anthony and I say this all the time. We grew up on movies, we love the movie experience. Doesn't mean that my kids have to love the movie experience, the movie going experience. They don't have to love watching things in a theater. They have very different relationship to technology than I did as a kid. They see things in a lot of different ways. But what's compelling about, and I think why he's saying TV's in a golden age, is that it is disrupting from a format standpoint. It's 10 hours of content, it's 8 hours of content. You get different emotional impact killing a character 5 hours into a 10-hour story.
100%.
Because you've spent, temporally, you've just spent 5 hours with that character versus an hour. It's just different, right? Like, so you've assigned more of your time, you have more investment, and when that character goes, you feel it because of that investment. There's a lot of things happening and bubbling. That's why I'm saying artists lead innovation. Some people talk about the length of the film. You go, yeah, but you know what? That it demanded it. It demanded it because you're working in a different format. You're trying to expand a very traditional structure into something more innovative and compelling because you have all these characters.
It's funny because we have even with Justice League, you know, we did like an IMAX. There's an IMAX version. Not many people have seen, but there's an IMAX version. And that has like a classic intermission. You know, I just built it with the classic intermission because I was like, this movie is 4 hours long. You know, let's just do a real intermission, you know, and Junkie did it.
Stretch your legs, go buy your popcorn. Yeah.
It's like 15 minutes, and it's just like, you know, there's this cool suite in the center. It just plays for 15 minutes, and, you know, it's just like a really, there is something really, I don't know, like when you see it in that format, you're like, okay, I get that. Like that. Like,
It's eventized. I'm
yeah,
here for like.
But at home, you know, putting an intermission in a movie that's 4 hours long is like, you can pause the movie anywhere you want.
Right.
Like, that's not.
Right.
That's not like, you know, that's just me being. So when we did it, you know, in the chaptered version at home, I was like, you know what? Don't
Don't do it.
let's not have the intermission
Right.
on this version.
Yeah.
Because it just. Plus, it has, because it's a chaptered movie, you can always just stop it at any of the chapters if you wanted to. So that was the way I thought about it. Originally, we had talked about doing it as it was going to be 6 parts released separately. But then there was like some, you know, legal rules about like,
What you could do
everyone
with
thought it was a TV
the
show.
cast
suddenly,
contracts
yeah,
and all that stuff.
You had to pay everyone like 6 times, and everyone was like, don't do that.
Yeah, yeah,
I was
right.
like, okay.
But it could have fit that format.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
The visual components of your movies are so exhilarating that, you know, it gets a lot of attention, right? Will you talk a little bit about how you approach your process with actors, introducing them to the story, what you're trying to do?
Yeah. One of like the actors that I had just a great experience working with was when I first worked with Billy Crudup on Watchmen, and I learned a lot from him just about, you know, his process. I'd always drilled down, you know, I was always like asking him about every little detail and about like the way he approaches scene work and all that, because I really respected, like when I would watch the way that he was really letting the material like shape his performance in a really beautiful way, it really made me, like, I was really impressed by it. And so I really, you know, I had done it a couple times up to that point, but everything I had done was pretty stylized. I mean, Sarah Polley is also an amazing actress, and
Yeah.
I got a lot from her, and that was like my first movie. But I felt like, so with Billy, you know, it was this process of like, I had a pretty strict sort of view. It goes back to sort of like the way I draw and the way, like, you know, this is the blocking, and like, don't stand over there, stand there, like sit in this chair, do this. I drew you kind of going like this.
Right.
You know,
Can
like,
you get to this?
Yeah, can you do that? Like, you know, like, sort of, this is a look of inquisition. You're like, you're wondering. See,
Yeah.
see what I'm doing? I think the process was sort of allowing me to let go of and let the actors live in it a little bit more. And that process for me has been, it's been liberating in a lot of ways from sort of the way I see it originally. You know, I know that, you know, there's a very fine line between, you know, letting it, releasing it completely and maybe creating chaos, and letting within the material the actors make it better, you know. Yeah. And I think that process for me has been like one of trust. And so now at this point, I do have a lot of joy. I take a lot of joy in having the actors kind of make the thing their own, and that process I find really, really fun. And kind of, I don't rehearse necessarily as much. I used to rehearse a lot, and then I kind of have come to this idea about rehearsing where I kind of feel like, and this is the thing that Billy and I used to talk about, like he'd say, like, you know, when you do a play, right, you get 4 weeks into rehearsals, you think it's the worst thing in the world, right? Because you just are saying the words, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got them, but they're not yours 100%. So you're just saying these words, you don't know what they mean anymore. You know, you basically rehearsed it to death, right? And he goes, but then a thing happens where you come in one day and you say the words and you don't know that they're not yours, right? Like you said something to me and I said something back, and it happened to be what was written down. Like I didn't know, you know what I mean? It's just a natural, like it's
living
almost,
in your subconscious.
It's almost as if I'm just saying what I thought I would say. And I'm like, that's beautiful, that's amazing. And I've never directed theater, so I thought like, wow. And he goes, and the problem is like on a movie set or in movie rehearsals, we normally don't have the time to get that comfortable with the script, you know, like to have it just be what I think. So he goes, the other time where I feel that is like maybe after the 5th time I've read, once I've just learned the words, you know, and they still mean something to me, it's emotionally, Like I'm saying them, and I'm listening to the other actor, and then what I'm saying back, I'm hearing myself say, and watching it land on them. And so like all of it is like, now it's tennis and it's like fresh, you know, and I don't know what I'm gonna do, and it's really amazing. So I've kind of adopted that style a little bit, you know, because I felt it's worked so well, is this kind of, you know, make sure everyone has it, but don't beat it to death, you know, and that's kind of the way I work the scenes now. It's just that moment where you pass, where like you're making a noise that sounds like a word, but you don't know what it is.
And this is a confidence and experience that sort of takes the artwork from a predetermined execution, right, to more of an example of tone and, you know, space. And so you're allowing now the actors to sort of live in that tone and that space that was in your head.
Yeah, with the hope that they know the character.
Right.
You have to hold the whole thing, right, in your head at the same time, all of it, everything that everyone thinks, like where you're going, where you've been, all that, you have it. So you hope that, in the best case, that the actor who's coming in that moment, they know their guy. The little thing they do that makes it better, that look, that pause, that understanding of what the other guy's saying, is better than I would have thought.
Yeah.
You know, that's when, for me, it's like.
Well, you get the three-dimensional living, breathing actor, and their lines can go away because they're doing it with a look now, or entire moments are conveyed, or, you know, you had a whole scene and all you needed was somebody who has that moment, right? Now the whole scene's worthless because you just really needed
sold it, yeah.
that.
Like I saw
you know?
it, yeah.
Yeah. And that's sort of the magic of it.
That's
I mean,
the magic.
We came from theater when we were younger, more specifically experimental theater. We're a little more adventurous sort of in our form and structure when we started making movies. But our process with actors has been the same throughout. We don't put marks on the ground. Our rehearsals are fairly quick because we don't want to burn them out. We're not doing it, you know. It's generally like, don't spend any energy, don't spend any emotion. Let's just see where you want to move. You know,
Yeah, we want to photograph you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's more about, we want to capture your behavior. They go away, we say to the DP, they're going to be in this general area. We might suggest to them that they sit at this point. We don't want to do that then because we don't want to get sucked into like a 20-minute conversation. So I want you to light over here too. We just shape it generally. And then when we turn the cameras on, that's why we don't shut them off, is we just start trapping people in the moment. Oh, cool. And we make them, you know, it's like they're out on the high wire now. We're not going to let them down until we get to the end. And that's, you know, we don't get out of our chairs either. It's really interesting. Like, we don't like to engage in dialogue while we're shooting. That's for before or after, you know? But if you start spending 10 minutes, for us, we start spending 10 minutes talking to an actor, now they have to process that for like 4 or 5 takes. You know, if you give them 10 minutes of notes, you're not going to see that in the next thing they do. You'll see that in maybe the next 5 takes that they do. Sure. You know, or you're going to overwhelm them and they're going to be out of it for 2 or 3 takes, or, you know, so our process gets really specific, but it tends to be one about like shouting things, you know.
Very simple.
Hey, next time, speed it up in the middle, and, you know, we want you to turn and look at them 2 lines earlier. Go, you know, we just kind of keep it simple, and yeah. And now they just have 2 things they have to think about. Okay, great. Now try this one angrier the whole time. You're really upset. Just let the anger show. Okay, on this one, suppress the anger. Play it like you're hiding it from them. And then we try to layer it. I think it's more of from our experimental roots of like, try things, you know? Let's see where it goes. Well, maybe we'll surprise ourselves. Maybe they'll surprise us. And we'll wind up with some kismet or something sublime, you know, that's in between the lines. And so the script for us, no matter how hard we work on it, actually just becomes like, you know, a really good plan that can then, once you get all the pieces in, we can start throwing out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how on the day with them, where do the pieces?
The comedy roots led us to improv, so we tend to use that depending on who the actor is. Some people are very good at it, others are terrible. And even the best ones, maybe 5 or 10% of it is usable, you know?
Sure,
and a lot of times you improvise for 2 or 3 takes, then we'll stop. If there's too much improv going on, we'll go, okay, come on over here. We get the script, and we'll
Let's
write
try
it.
the words again.
Right.
Oh, write it.
No, we'll go, that thing you said was really funny. I wish you had said it in the take where he said this. So let's just create a script that's taking the best things you guys are doing. Oh, and there's a very funny gag here. Had you done this together? And then we'll write it, rehearse it again, and then they'll go. Very few actors you do that with, though. But Downey, Pratt, there's a couple of key actors.
But I would
Hemsworth,
say, I think it's important though to point out, it's not, there are amazing actors and favorite performers from like every point on the spectrum. Some actors are very mechanical. They want to know exactly when somebody's going to pick up a glass and what, it's very.
And if they don't pick up the glass
prefigured.
in that moment.
But
right.
there's some of your favorite actors you've ever seen on camera. So you can get to it from different ways. It just depends what you're.
Yeah, I remember I did a commercial with Harrison Ford, right? And Harrison was like, it was a commercial for Lancia Libra, which is an Italian car, I think Italian. I was operating, and I was the DP and the director. So I was with him, and he literally goes, it's a 35 mil. I go, yeah. He goes, okay, so this will be, I'm just gonna keep this in the bottom of the frame like this, and then when I put it down, I'll put it over here, which is still in, I think, right there, just the top. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like he's an animal. Like it's like legitimately an animal. And I was like, that's awesome. It was a car commercial, so we had to do all the air conditioner, and we wanted to show the bits of the car. And he was just like, and I've done a million car commercials, but I never had an actor do this. Because I'm behind him, and he'd go like, Zach, let's do this quick. And he goes, how about this? Like, all right, I'm going to the radio in 3, 2, 1. I'm dialing the radio. I'm going to go for the volume. And now I'm going to go to the air conditioner in 3, 2, air conditioner. And I'm like, so it was like, I was like, we got it.
I hope you have that daily that has all that in it.
It was just amazing. Because I had been like, holy shit, like I've been with a million hand actors who never do that, who don't help me. And it's just like, it was really cool. I was like, wow, someone understands like the camera. Like someone gets this relationship, to like, I'm clearly being photographed, and this is how the world is different.
Now those actors blow our minds too. It's amazing. Like we always say, like especially, actor, like what you're describing with Harrison, like some actors who have directing experience will also be very savvy on that level.
Or spatial awareness.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want me to do that? Yeah, like people who haven't, like, or who have gotten, and then they're also amazing actors that have gotten through their career with the camera chasing them, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys, who get out of a chair like this, and I'm like, that's not how you get out of a movie chair. You gotta stand up, stay in focus.
We can see you.
Like if you lean forward.
But there are really people. There are some actors, though. Again, some of them are among the best actors, though. If you make them too aware of what's happening on a technical level, you'll just see them close down.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like a lot of guys. You're just like, you can't. Like it's like not for everybody, but for a lot of the actors, I do the hands, the close-ups of the hands. I just do it myself because it's just a million times easier. And like in a lot of times in my movies, they're very gigantic close-ups, crazy, like really difficult shots,
Right.
And like sometimes I'm operating and doing it because I know like I can turn the thing and get it to the focal plane.
That you needed that,
which is impossible, right?
Yeah.
Or you can spend 10 minutes trying to talk somebody through.
And be like, okay, that's
No, too far.
Let's try it again.
Just can you see how it's anyway? But like I know, so I'll just be like, okay, great.
Yeah.
See ya like tomorrow. I'll just can I have that glove that you're wearing? It's like I had like Affleck's. They had to make like the suit. He's a giant, but like so they make me a little cuff and the suit arm. Then cut it off.
You had your own.
Then I could have my own, so I could like pick up things.
Thank you, Alfred. Don't mention it.